Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Tradeshift Sanctuary. My name is Sarika Garg. I'm the Chief Strategy Officer at Tradeshift. And today we have a wonderful panel with us, and we're going to talk about AI in supply chain. It's about intelligence, not automation. So I have wonderful panels. Would you like to introduce yourselves?
Of course. My name is Thijs Stalenhoef. I am the SVP of Global Product at Tradeshift.
My name is Gert Sylvest. I'm co-founder of Tradeshift, and I'm heading up our digital innovation arm that's called Frontiers.
Great. So the first question I wanted to start with was, AI has become such a buzzword, and it's become an umbrella term for anything to do around automation. And I almost feel it's like dumb automation and intelligent automation. And so there's RPA, there's neural networks, so there's machine learning. How do you think of AI? Can you maybe give your perspective and what's real and what's not?
Yeah. I actually think you put it really, really well here, right? There is dumb automation, and RPA is definitely the most well-known example of that today. And really what it does is it just watches a user do a task and then repeats it. It is by definition something that you add to an already existing and maybe quite ancient system to try and get that last bit of automation, that last bit of efficiency out of it. When really, if you want to make a leap forward, you're going to need to build a new platform, you're going to need to look for new technologies and start with them, start with true AI and intelligence at the core and get far more value that way, rather than just trying to do that last little bit of optimization in a very dumb way, in effect.
So where are we today? So what are some of the AI things that we are doing at Tradeshift? Can you maybe share some examples of that?
Yeah, of course. One of my personal favorites is essentially anything to do with building trust. And it has to do with who are you actually doing business with? Are you actually able to identify your entire supply chain? And are you then able to pull in as much information as possible from any number of sources and be sure that you're talking about the same company? Vendor master data is a huge problem for many companies. And just even getting that right is already a huge step. But then being able to layer multiple levels of information from any kind of source on top of that can enable you to build trust between companies far faster. That in turn then means that you can have a supply chain that is far more agile. If you're moving into a new area of business, a new country, maybe you have to establish an entirely new supply chain, and maybe you don't have months and months and months to figure this out. Maybe you only have weeks or even days. AI can actually help you make those connections and give your users that level of information at their fingertips, which enables them to act. It's an empowerment thing as well, which means that they're going to feel much better about the job that they're doing, and they're going to be more effective at it. And as a result, you as a business is going to be far more competitive.
So in what you're saying, what I understand is at Tradeshift, when we onboard companies onto Tradeshift, we use AI to actually help us do more intelligent onboarding and more impactful onboarding. Is that right?
That is completely correct, yeah.
Okay.
And it's an amazing process, actually. Even if you just look at very simple things whereby companies sometimes have 20 different records all pointing to the same company, right? All pointing to the same seller that they might be working with. And for us to be able to actually look through all of that with AI and say, really, that's one and the same company, and that's actually a company that's already on our platform. Connecting to that company is literally a matter of seconds now. That's one little thing, but it accumulates. Imagine that you have 100,000 suppliers around the world, like some of our clients actually do.
Yeah.
That is a massive, massive win.
Right. So one of the things we find is we're as humans pretty crappy at making a lot of decisions. And the one example that I actually love talking about, and I've heard you guys talk about, is approvals. And what happens is I get tons of approval requests, all the time, every day, at least 10 approvals. And usually I just say yes, 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 because I just want to get on with my work. What have we done around approvals at Tradeshift? To help us actually solve that problem?
I think it's a good example that kind of highlights some of the powers of AI. If you contrast it with the RPA process, where you fundamentally go in, take an existing process, as Thijs talked about, and you speed it up, you make it more efficient. But I think one of the opportunities is to use different sources of information to drive an automatic process altogether. And I think that requires you to look in a wider context. And you can imagine you can make a much smarter, more informed decision about how to approve something if you understand what is the context of the request. So who's the individual? What is the individual's position in the organization? What are the projects they're working on? What are the kinds of suppliers that they're interacting with at the moment? How does it relate to possibly the product that these resources are being folded into? And I think, again, that's one of the powers of AI, to be able to look across all of those different contexts and make a smarter decision than we as humans might be able to do.
So Thijs, if I can ask you, because I know your team has been building this approval process automation, how does it work? What's the machinery behind that?
So if you think about our platform, all of the data that's going through, all the spend, the product information that might be shared, vendor information, essentially all of that is being taken into account, and layered on top of that are actually all the interactions that the users are doing. Yeah. Right? So it is constantly learning from decisions that users make. And as things change, it will continuously learn and adapt accordingly. And again, even if you're saying, hey, we don't need this full automation, right? Or there's certain areas that are too sensitive for this, the AI can still actually give you far more precise information about what is it you're actually looking at? Where should you be paying attention? What is it you're actually being asked to approve for? Yeah. Right? Is it just, I approve? Do I approve for a particular project? Do I approve under particular circumstances? Right? And connecting all those dots is actually a fairly hard process. And like you were saying yourself, if you have many of those a day, you probably look at the person that came before you and maybe already approved, some 2 or 3 levels down. Yeah, you are likely to just say yes. But if you got an actual, overview that actually said, hey, all of this is fine, it's under contract, you're within budget, everything else is in order, but here's like 1 or 2 points that you maybe just want to check up on, and you get the question to actually specifically say whether those things are okay. Now it's no longer a robotic RPA style, click OK, yes, and that's it. You're actually asking the user an intelligent question, and they will give you an intelligent answer.
So are there any other examples that you would share within Tradeshift that we are working on or that we have done?
Yeah, I think one of the areas where we invested very early in artificial intelligence, that is basically in making sense of the fundamental information that companies receive. And I think that's something you see everywhere, that companies have very large resources of data pooled up in various ERP systems and other systems. But one of the fundamental challenges is how to make sense of this data. Everyone has invested in interoperability layer and technology that connects systems. But I think that's one of the fundamental powers of AI, and how you see companies like Google use it. That is basically to fundamentally make sense of the data. And so maybe a fairly boring application, but just making sense of the contents of an invoice. If you receive a paper invoice or image-based invoices, what does it actually mean? And I think everyone is familiar with how processes inside of large enterprises work, that if you process something like an incoming document, you typically throw away a lot of information along the way before it ends up in the systems of the financial department. And one good example is, for example, in the categorization of spend, that if you understand what is on the line level of an invoice, you have a far better chance of succeeding in automatically categorizing spend, compared if, for the reasons of some process, you actually threw that information away. And if you can go directly to the source, which is often messy, based on pictures or unstructured document formats, I think machine learning can actually help make sense of.
So shifting on, and maybe to the last question, I think we've talked a lot about AI as it is today and what's going on. So if we fast forward 5 years from now, if we look at B2B marketplaces or supply chain payments, what do you see? What's the world going to look like?
So I think the barrier in the adoption of AI, I think, is perhaps less in the core technology of AI. I think there has been some significant leaps over the past 10 years. Everyone has seen examples, perhaps you have seen examples of how AI developed by Google is able to classify everything that's in a picture and point out that this is a brown dog and this is a table and so on. So I think the core technology has reached a really impressive maturity, but I think there are some things that stand in the way for the adoption. And I think it's back to the question about RPA or smart or dumb intelligence. I think it's in the fundamental way that we think about our processes and how we work with data. That's really the change that we're going to see over the next 5 years. And maybe a good example is, imagine some person going to a recluse for 10 years on a remote island, not having access to internet, and this person comes back and sees Facebook and thinks, I want one of those, this is amazing technology, can I install it on my computer? Yeah. And I think it appeals to everyone that it doesn't make sense to take a network and put it into your own little box. But that's the reality of how many companies are operating today. You've gone through many mergers and acquisitions, you have 10 or 20 or 30 different silos of ERP systems that are not really interoperable. And I think that's really the challenge for the next 5 years. That is to see, can we think fundamentally different about the data sharing? It's much more valuable to apply AI to where the data is born, which is in the relationship between companies, in the network, so to speak. And I think that's a fundamental barrier to really reap the values. And then you can distribute it. We talked about access to finance, for example. The way that risk and credit scoring works today is fundamentally incredibly inefficient. Just looking at receivables financing, there's a potential 2.5 trillion gap of liquidity needs that cannot be addressed. And it's a fundamental problem of no access to data and no transparency in that data. So if you can drive the network agendas here, I think our ability to actually reap value of applying AI to a field, for example, to estimate the risk of insurance or loans, I think that's the real impactful change that we're going to see.
That's great. Thijs?
Yeah, no, I think that was an amazingly thorough overview, right, of some of those things. So maybe what I'll just try and do is kind of, summarize it really shortly in the way that I would actually look at that too, is to say, look, a lot of AI today and some of the examples we talked about are a lot about efficiency, and again, smart versus dumb. So that's kind of step one. I think the next level up is opportunity, right? Where the AI starts suggesting things that you should be doing based on far more data than you as a human can by yourself or even in a group process, right? Please do business with this company. They have a lot of mutual interest. They've already done business with similar companies like yours. They're well regarded and so on. And then lastly, and this is sort of also the credit scoring and so on example, is trust. Right? And actually being able to use all the information that you have in a network like Tradeshift to your advantage to actually identify, is this really a real company? Are they valid? Should we give them credit? Should I do business with them? And I think that's sort of the trajectory you're going to see more and more moving upwards towards that area where we can rapidly trust, rapidly start doing business, and rapidly get results.
That's very well put. If I can maybe add to that, for a CFO or CPO of today, what they should be thinking of, actually everything that they think is a problem today around automation, in 5 years from now, it won't be an issue at all. It'll be all about the opportunity on top of that. So It's very important to look at platforms that are enabling AI as of today.
Exactly, right. And I think that this is one of the core elements, right? If you think about something like an invoice, and how much effort that still costs today, right? You have a whole department, in accounts payable that just processes all of these things. When really all it is about somebody saying, you bought something, please pay for it. Right? You don't go into the supermarket and negotiate with the cashier over, a gallon of milk that you're buying.
Yes.
Right? Yet that's sort of what we're doing each time we have an invoice. And I think through AI we can get sort of rid of that whole mess and sort of say, hey, look, we're just back to, I want to buy that gallon of milk and here's the money to pay for it. But knowing that all the trust and the rules and so on that you need to have in place have been taken care of. They're now out of sight and we can just focus on the actual core business that we're all trying to achieve.
Great, well, we're out of time. That was a really wonderful conversation. Thank you so much for giving your time. Gert, Thijs.
Thank you, Sarika.
Thanks.